I haven't got too long today, so I'm going to get started. I love the movie. I watched it this morning, actually, here at home. And obviously, I'd love to see it on the big screen, but it's not as
Me
easy
too.
these days. I'm just wondering about this idea for you. When you get kind of like debut filmmakers, I always wonder if it's like a story that's been with them a long time. In the same way, when a band release their debut album, it's usually a collection of hits that they've been writing since they were young. And is that the case for this project?
Oh, absolutely. Like I say I've been writing Miss Juneteenth my entire life because, I've been going to Juneteenth as long as I remember. And the Miss Juneteenth pageant in particular was so formative for me. Like I say that it was my version of Miss America. And in saying that, it's huge for a young Black girl growing up in, you know, Texas in the South in America, like I got to see like all these young Black women on stage that, looked like me, and it gave me my own sense of confidence. And, you know, I remember them looking hopeful. So it gave me a hope for the future. So it was huge.
Yeah, because I mean, with over here in the UK, when we've been kind of privy to beauty pageants, it's usually sort of 6-year-old girls dressed up to look like Dolly Parton and stuff like that. So for those of us in the UK that don't know much about this particular one, what is Miss Juneteenth, and why is it so different and special?
Yeah, Miss Juneteenth is it's described as a scholastic beauty pageant for young Black women in America. And just in case your viewers are unfamiliar with Juneteenth, I know more people know about it, now as of recent. But Juneteenth commemorates the fact that the slaves in Texas didn't find out they were free until 2.5 years after everyone else. Their freedom was kept hidden from them. And so Juneteenth, we commemorate it every year. It's commemorated with much pomp and circumstance in Texas. There's a parade, and there's like blues music and dance and barbecue, and the community really just comes together. And in the centerpiece of it is this pageant called Miss Juneteenth, and it really is for young Black women to gain college scholarship. And these women are the ancestors, obviously, of the enslaved people in Texas who didn't find out they were free until late.
And I mean, obviously you've done sort of shorts before, but how did you find the transition into a feature length? And were there any new challenges that you hadn't quite anticipated that came up that you had to tackle?
Yeah, it's interesting because I describe, going from shorts to feature, and shorts have their own challenges. Absolutely. You have to be really succinct in the storytelling, but I describe it as, a feature is like taking the training wheels off. And I had unique challenges because I was a relatively new mom, so I was navigating my own motherhood and telling this mother-daughter story. But it was also really, I think, great for me in the sense that, my daughter really changed my storytelling. I knew that I had to find a tougher love version of, who this mother was, but I also had to find the joy that I was experiencing in real time with my daughter.
And I was wondering too about, I mean, the cast is so good in this instance. I've been a fan of Nicole's for some time, but this feels like one of those films where you'll have the bragging rights to say, "Oh, I found Alexis one day." I feel she feels like a star in the making. I was wondering about the casting of Nicole, and also as a sort of second part to the question, just how thrilled you were to discover Alexis.
Yeah, Alexis is so unique and special. And I felt really lucky with her casting, because she obviously was a young woman that was local, and this is her first feature film. And I felt lucky in the sense that it was really important for me to have that character be someone who could, walk and talk as a young woman from the region. Authenticity was so important for me for this film. And so, Alexis was incredible. As far as Nicole, she's been someone whose work I've admired for some time. And, my mandate for this role in particular was to have an actor who really could bring, this sense of nuance to the screen. And that was important to me because I knew I was telling a story about, for much of it, we're seeing the interior life of this character. So it was important for me to have someone there who could really, translate that.
But obviously, it's been this year, particularly in the United States, it's been quite a tumultuous year, both politically and socially for the Black community, obviously in America. But one of the is a byproduct of that. Have you noticed an amplification of your voice and of stories? It feels like, particularly from a UK perspective, people are actually entering into a dialogue now that some people might have been afraid to have had before. And obviously, there's a lot of bad to have come out of this year. But do you think in some ways that you do feel like the Black experience has now got more of a platform than it once did?
As far as, the voice being amplified, like, I do feel like it's a particular time, or, when the film came out, it was a particular moment, unfortunately, that was occurring because of this national tragedy. And honestly, a series of national tragedies. This one just, was one that just was so, out in the open, the world stopped for a moment, and I think it did create a situation in which people were interested in that moment in, hearing more Black voices be amplified. And it wasn't just in the cinema space. Obviously, we were talking about, what I feel like are the vital and important voices that are like on the ground, like, the activists and community leaders, um, even those who are active in the political space, who are, making change on the ground. And, my hope is the same hope that I had when the film was released, on Juneteenth, was that, people continue to hear these voices and amplify these voices. And, we were having this conversation, we didn't make the film overnight. The film was obviously made, in time for its release. So these are conversations that we've been having in the Black community for years, and people just now are open to hearing those conversations. And I could just be hopeful that it'll continue, and it's not just for a moment.
And in light of what's happened this year, do you think that now when you talk about Miss Juneteenth and when you watch the film back, has your perspective of the movie changed at all, or was it exactly the same film that you made when you sort of said cut?
I mean, my perspective, I think, in the way that I approached the film and in the way that the film was built, has remained. What I've started to see is more things, even in the film, as people are discussing it, because you see really how your film goes out into the world and it affects people, there's common ways that it affects people, but I'm also seeing different ways that it affects people. We made, like, I feel like a very specific film, that was made in this community that I grew up in, that I knew so intimately. But there are also some universal themes that I feel like have connected with folks, and it's really moving to see that happen. That's for me, that was my goal as a filmmaker, because I put so much of my heart into the film.
And I loved it. I mean, I feel like Texas is such a huge part of this movie, and whenever I watch films set in the kind of in the deep south of America, I always find there's a kind of musicality to the kind of the environment, and it always feels like a real character in the movies where films are set there. I was wondering about growing up in Texas yourself, if there was did you feel there was lots of opportunities for creativity, or was it something you had to quite kind of force through at a sort of later age?
Yeah, I came to cinema late, so there really was no infrastructure for, a young Black girl in Fort Worth, Texas to, see, I think, a career in cinema for myself. I really came in a non-traditional route. I came through community theater. There was a small Black theater, in the same neighborhood you saw the film shot in, called Sojourner Truth. And what really would happen is I would go to this theater and see these really, it was revolutionary in a way, now that I'm an adult, and I realized that I got to see these really complex Black plays be put on. And I think that really inspired my love of story, and acting in particular. The actors were the ones who were out front. And I later, really got into literature, like their literary greats that I just love, like Toni Morrison and Alice Walker, and all these wonderful women writers who were writing books that I could just read, and like I could just visually imagine the stories in my head. And it was later that, you know, in kind of dipping my toe in the water as an actor, that, you know, I discovered cinema and just kind of threw myself into it, and also discovered some really beautiful independent films that were being made. And I was kind of seeking out, and just kind of winded my way to cinema. But, you know, there was no infrastructure, I think, initially. It was just kind of happenstance weaving my way through.
Yeah, and I was wondering about sort of what's next, and what filmmaker do you have, sort of, you have ambitions to continue to be, because I obviously this story in Miss Juneteenth is one very close to your heart, and it's about an environment you know very well. But is there a sci-fi in you one day, or films kind of set in a completely different world to your own, or do you think just naturally you get drawn to stories that have a really personal resonance to yourself?
I think I'll always do, you know, my originals, my kind of personal stories. They'll always, you know, be something that I come back to. You know, genre for me is interesting because, you know, I tend towards the drama space. You know, there's some dramedy in me, but I also, you know, would love to branch out into other genres. I think what's most important for me is that I'm able to, you know, maintain that sense of intimacy, you know, and obviously I like a little spectacle. No matter what I do, you know, and also be able to tell really human stories, you know, no matter what story that I'm involved in. That nuance and specificity and authenticity is absolutely vital to what I do.
Brilliant. Well, I can't wait to see what you have next up your sleeve, because I thought this film was brilliant. So thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys.
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey,